Ground Zero. It is a place of enormous import to all Americans. It is obviously especially important to New Yorkers, but this is the country's place, the country's hallowed ground. And today, in 29 minutes, a formal ceremony begins, ending the first painful chapter of the events of September 11th. Good morning again, everyone. I'm Aaron Brown in New York. It was 10:29 Eastern Time, about 20 minutes, a little longer after the first tower collapsed, that the North Tower came down. It was an unimaginable moment when that first tower came down, and then when the second came down, there was this, as we remember it, this air of expectancy. When is it going to happen? And of course, who is going to get out? How many of the 50,000 people who were in the buildings that day would survive? We worried so, all Americans worried so that day, what the death toll would be. We have answers to that now, about 3,000. And many of their families will be down there today as Ground Zero, the recovery phase, closes. This today is a public event. It is not a day of speeches, but it is very much a public event because this is very much a public place. It is a place for New Yorkers and for the rest of the country, and this is a moment for them to share. But the other night, about 8:30 or so the other night, there was another ceremony, a more private closing ceremony for the workers who have been down there for 260 days. They took down the last beam. It is a beam that is called 1001B. It stood at the South Tower. They came down, as they have done so many times before, these workers, thousands of them that night, and they took a torch to that beam, the last beam standing, and they cut it down. The beam itself had been decorated with the names of victims, with companies that had worked down there. All over it you see the number 343. 343, of course, is the number of firefighters who were lost that day. They laid the beam out and then they covered it in a black shroud. This was not a moment for the world. Although there was a camera there, this was a moment for them, for the men and the women who 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in the rain of the fall, in the cold of the winter and the spring, were down there, often on their hands and knees, looking for anything and everything that might reunite a family with a lost loved one. They put an American flag on beam 100B, and it has sat there. Today, that beam will come out of Ground Zero as part of the ceremonies that will take place. You just look at the flag and you think about what that day meant to so many lives in this city and around the country. Among the people who are down there today, there are literally hundreds of families of victims of the 3,000, the 2,800 people who died on the 11th. They are in the crowd. They have no special moment in the ceremony itself, and yet the ceremony itself is special in total for them. There are, I suppose, for every victim a different story, but if we could group them into two groups, we would say that there are those who were fortunate enough to have a body recovered or to have something recovered of their loved one, and there are those who still wait for a ring, an identification, a DNA match, something that says, this is my husband, this is my boyfriend, this is my child, this is the time we can bury them. We're not going to do a lot of prepared stories today, but here is one on the victims and their lives, reported this morning by CNN's Michael Oku.
Aaron, good morning. There are countless lessons, I suppose, that we have learned from September 11th, including the fact that that often used word closure may never be fully realized. Some families will have an even harder time to achieve it than others.
Go.
For families who lost lives here, it is the site of a massacre. For some, it is also a final resting place.
We came to the country to have a better life. We did have it for 22 years. It was a fairy tale. Now it's reality.
Russian immigrants Anna and Roman Gertzberg lost their only child, 25-year-old Marina. None of her remains have been identified. She arrived for work at Cantor Fitzgerald in Tower 1 early on 9/11. It was only her 7th day.
That day she had to go to school, and that's the reason she was early. She's with us. She's with us. She can hear us. She's just in a different state.
We see her in dreams, we talk to her, we hug her. Usually when the person have a dream, they want to wake up and say, you know, thank God it was a dream. But we have opposite thing. We don't want to wake up.
Every morning for 91 days, retired firefighter Lee Ialpi woke up to search for his son, 29-year-old Jonathan, a firefighter with Rescue 2. Ialpi continued to come long after he lost hope that his son was alive.
I helped out in a lot of situations where people were found. We didn't find them alive, but we found them. And when we found somebody, that made it easy for somebody out there. But I said, I'm staying here until I find my son.
He said searching for his son was agonizing, day after day. Back when residents here said the air carried the scent of unsettled souls. To get through it, he talked to his dead son.
What did you say to him? That I missed him. I missed his 5 and 6 and 7 phone calls every day of the week. I miss him. But I told him we were going to bring him home.
On December 11th, he did. One of the 289 intact bodies recovered.
Yeah, this is Marina's room.
Without remains, the Gertzbergs hold on to remnants, photos of a life, young, developing, and still full of promise. A video of their joint 50th birthday party, watched here for the first time since 9/11.
But their efforts have not been in vain because I have turned out to be a great person, don't you guys think?
I spoke with General Examiner Office. I speak with them very often. They have a lot of parts which still has to be DNA'd, and I still hope they will find something.
But Anna now says she'd rather they not find anything at all.
I have a story that if she vanished, she burned, and that's it. That's why they can't find the piece, nothing. But if they're going to find the piece, it means
She suffered.
She suffered, and I don't want her to suffer. She didn't deserve to be died.
Now, the Gertzbergs say that they will be attending the ceremonies this morning. They say coming to Ground Zero is like returning to family, not only because they will be closer to Marina, but they will also be closer to families who have experienced what they have, which is an unrelenting sense of loss and a much deeper connection to Ground Zero than any of the rest of us could ever imagine. Aaron?
Michael, thank you. That's an interesting thought, because in so many ways, each of us in the city, and I think each of us in the country, has a small claim on those acres down in lower Manhattan. They are part of the definition of our lives now, of our history, and certainly the families of the victims have a special claim, as does the fire department in the city of New York, the police department, the Port Authority, and the rest. Often, as we have talked about the tragedy of September 11th, we have focused on those who lost their lives and perhaps spent too little time on those who got out, if only barely. Greg Manning's wife got out, but only barely. And it is a remarkable story, I think, of modern medicine and God's great gift of courage, that she is alive and recovering, and that he is with us to talk about it this morning. It's nice to see you. How's she doing?
She's doing really well. She's home, she's working hard, and you know, she and the seriously injured really have to deal with this for the rest of their lives. Today, though, she's honored that I have the privilege, and we have the privilege of seeing so much tribute paid to our friends and colleagues who were lost.
Yeah. Let's talk just. I don't want to dwell on the 11th at all in anything we do today. What was she doing that morning?
Just entering the lobby.
And she was hit by a wave of fire?
Came down the elevator shaft and engulfed her as she ran out.
And as I recall the number, it was something like 85% of her body.
Just over 80% of her body.
It is, for those of you who don't know, and I suppose most of you do, there are few injuries that are either more painful or more dangerous. The danger of infection is incredibly high, and the recovery process itself is incredibly difficult. She was in the hospital how long?
She was actually in the ICU for 3 months and then in rehab for 3 months and 4 days.
And how much in that time did you think she's not going to get there? She's not going to make it?
We didn't know she was out of the woods until just before Thanksgiving. She was putting up a very courageous fight, but for all the families who were down there, were actually up at the burn center, there was an incredible vigil, and we just had to rely on hope and prayer and really this incredible support of all of our friends and family, certainly in our case.
One more question about that, and then let's move on. Does she recall much about it? There was a moment where a young man, I remember, was released from the burn unit, and he talked to us, and one of the things he said, and it is among the most powerful things I think I've ever heard in my life, he said at the moment this happened, he thought, oh God, make it quick. Does she remember the moment?
She remembers when it happened. She has said she couldn't believe it was her, and she knows exactly what she thought, which is, oh God, let me live for Tyler. It was our son who was 10 months old.
Yeah. And how is Tyler, by the way?
And Tyler is doing great, and Lauren can now spend the day with him, pick him up, run around. They have a fabulous relationship, and it's just such a treasure that he has her.
Tell me about, you wrote, or you put together a book, which is in a lot of ways a series of emails that you wrote to friends talking about her recovery and your family's recovery. Tell me about why.
I wrote the book really to be a legacy for Lauren and for Tyler, to read about what his mother had gone through. We didn't know that Lauren was going to make it, but really I wanted to pay tribute not just to her, but to all the amazing things that were being done to help her. It's a remarkable story. She remains an inspiration to me and in fact to a lot of other people, and we get letters every day from people who read the book that say she helps them to heal. It's just a tribute to her.
It is a remarkable story of strength. And as I was looking through it last night, it is one of those great reminders of how resilient we are in certain moments of our lives. I suspect that knowing that Tyler needed Mom is a great motivation to get through the agonizing pain of a burn recovery.
Lauren is a remarkable woman in that she's always looking forward. She's always thinking, what can I do to get through? And her goal was to get home so she could play with Tyler. I mean, she says also to be with me, but really, when we brought him to the hospital, it was just a remarkable day.
Yeah, well, those of us who are fathers, we understand the difference. We're important, but the day today, is it in some ways, honestly, a day like any other? Does it have any particular symbolic meaning to you?
It's got great meaning to me because we lost a lot of friends and colleagues, and I'm glad that they're being honored. I'm glad that respect's being paid to them, as well as to all the people who rushed in to save them. So this means a lot.
Greg, we wish you nothing but the best. We wish her nothing from the best. She is an extraordinary example of, in my mind at least, what courage really means and what heroism really is. It visits us. We don't ask for it. Best of luck to you. Thanks for coming in. Thank you very much, Greg Manning. I can't imagine how many stories there are out there like Greg's, and we are moved by all of them. We saw a moment ago Governor Pataki is down there. The governor is a very important player in what will happen next down at the World Trade Center, whatever memorial, whatever rebuilding goes on there. That really is going to come under the governor's authority, though it'll be a very open process, and a great many people will have a great many things to say about it. Among the people who will have ideas are the men of the New York City Fire Department. If there is one number beyond 9/11 that people remember, it is the number 343. That is the number of firefighters who were lost that day. In firehouses, this is the ramp, by the way, into Ground Zero, and we see former Mayor Giuliani, and monitor's not great here, but I believe that was Mayor Bloomberg standing next to him. This ramp is where both the girder and a symbolic stretcher will be brought up in a little while when the ceremony begins at 10:29. That ramp, we've been down a number of times, is how all the trucks got in, how the workers came down there. For those of you who have never been to the site, we will tell you it is like none other in this way. For all the noise of a major construction, it was remarkably quiet a lot. There was very little talking going on there. There was serious and important work to be done. And everyone down there, from the iron workers who were hauling away things to the firefighters and the police officers, often on their hands and knees, they treated it with the great respect that such a place deserved and always deserves. That's Archbishop Egan. Jason Carroll is at a fire station in Chelsea, in Lower Manhattan. It's one of those places, and there are an awful lot of them in town, that lost people. Engine 3, Ladder 12 lost 5 members, as I recall, Jason. And they are there today, aren't they?
They are here, and I have to tell you, it is an incredibly sad day for the people here at Engine Company number 3. As you say, they lost 5 men on September 11th. Very quickly, Aaron, if I could just mention their names: firefighter Steve Belson, Battalion Chief Oriel Palmer, Lieutenant Phil Petty, firefighter Michael Mullen, and firefighter Angel Huarbe. Aaron, take a look. You can see behind me a number of the firefighters have gathered here at the station house. Also, some of the victims' family members. They're going to be watching the ceremony on TV at 10:29 a.m. First, there'll be some sort of a prayer service. Then they'll have a moment of silence. Then there will be a moment of reflection. Joining me right now just to talk a little bit more about what's happening out here today, firefighter Tiernock Cassidy. You were there when the second tower collapsed. You were also very much involved with the recovery effort. What are some of your thoughts now at this moment?
About the closing of the recovery? It's a sad day, but today seeing all the families here makes it very comforting. It feels, everybody did their part. Everybody stepped up to do what needed to be done with the recovery efforts. I was down there in the month of December, my 30-day detail, and amongst the many other thousands of other firefighters that were down there.
I was listening to Aaron talk a little earlier, and he brought up a very good point, the fact that when you guys were down there, it was really a painstaking effort, was it not? Very sensitive effort to handle everything that you were coming across.
It was very emotional. I mean, certain times down there with the five firefighters we lost from this house, I'd keep thinking I'd find them that day, and it was tough, but you have to be comfortable with the way everything turned out, and hopefully the families are happy with the way the city was running everything.
In terms of comfort, is it helpful to be here today, surrounded by all the other firefighters, some of the victims' family members, everyone coming together today?
It feels very good. It feels like, this is my family right here, and I love everybody in this firehouse.
I know at 10:29 or shortly thereafter there will be a moment of silence, moment of reflection. Any idea what you will be thinking about at that time?
Just those that weren't found, those that still weren't ID'd yet, and hoping that some still be recovered from the DNA or whatever. Just for final, maybe some closure in that sense.
Thank you so very much, Tiernock Cassidy. Thank you again for joining us again. Such a sensitive morning. Again, Aaron, for the folks here, and this, by the way, is going to be happening at fire stations all across the city, as you know. This is about reflection, it is about recovery, and it's also about rebuilding. Aaron?
Jason, thank you. There's a firehouse out in Brooklyn that, in many ways, the staff of Newsnight, our 10 o'clock program, has adopted, and our hearts are there. They lost 8 guys that day. Richard Picciotto is quite fortunate to be sitting next to us today. He was in the South Tower? You started in the North Tower, ended up in the South Tower?
I was in the North Tower the whole time.
Yeah.
I was in the North Tower when the South Tower collapsed, and then I was in it when the North Tower collapsed also.
What's the importance of the day to you, to your colleagues?
Well, the importance of the day is we lost 343 of my brothers.
Is this a sad day?
Oh.
Or is it a moving forward day? How do you see it?
It's both. It's the end of one phase and the beginning of another. We wanted to recover all our brothers.
Yeah.
We haven't. We recovered less than half. And the realization today is that we're not going to recover them. Maybe some DNA will be found, but we're not going to recover them. So it's the beginning of a new process that we have to move on and grieve and move on, though.
It's incredible the things we hope for in life sometimes, that what we want right now, so many families want, 1,000 families want, is a strand of DNA, something too small to see, a strand of DNA that will say, that was my guy, my neighbor, my brother, my friend, my colleague. Do you think the fire department has been changed, not by the numbers, but by the moment and the reaction to the moment and everything since?
Without a doubt. The fire department, like New York and like this country, is more aware. I think most firemen realize how precious life is. I mean, that's what we do. We save lives, but how precious our own lives are, and how easily taken they are. So our priorities change. I think most of the priorities of people have changed. That we put important things important.
This is quite an aside. It's an oddly dangerous thing to think about if you're a fireman, because one of the things you have to do is not dwell on the possibilities, on the consequences, to do the kind of work that you have to do. Is there a danger that the men of the department are more fearful and therefore less effective?
No, I don't think so. Since September 11th in New York City, we've responded to thousands of fires, put thousands of fires out. The men are still going into fires. We're putting them out. There's always a calculated risk, but we have good officers, good firemen, they're tremendously motivated people, and we do the job we have to do. We do it because we love it. It's a calling. It's a calling that most firemen have, and we enjoy doing it.
Before I lose you here, do you think about the day and your own experience all the time?
All the time, constantly, every day.
You were, as you said, in the North Tower. Just before we went on, you showed me a picture of about where you were and what was left, which is nothing at all. How'd you get out?
We were buried. I was buried with 12 other firemen, a civilian, and a woman, Josephine. We were calling for help for a long time. No answers on the radio.
What's a long time? How long?
Time gets a little sketchy, but about maybe 2 hours before we got a response, and then another hour or so before this area where we were, it was like a cave. It was dark. I told everyone to turn off their lights and their radios to save battery. We'd left one radio on, and we were calling. After a long time, maybe 3 hours, it was dark. I started seeing a little bit of light. I thought it was hallucinating. But what happened, there was like a little chasm in this area where we were, and it was leading, actually light was able to filter in. Shafts of light were coming in. It was always there. We never saw it because all that dust, that tremendous dust cloud, and the smoke from the surrounding buildings obscured it. But when the dust cloud settled and the smoke shifted a little bit, we could see this light. Climbed up through the interior. Oh, it sure did. It sure did, because up until then I was thinking, even though we survived the collapse, we're alive, there's no way anyone's ever going to get to us. So it was just going to be a slow death.
Now, you knew people, you must have known people were looking.
Yeah, I was actually in contact with some people. Mark Ferran, another chief from the 12th Battalion, one of the first, I made contact with him again approximately 2 hours later, and I told him, I said, Mark, we're in the North Tower, the B stairway, approximately the 3rd floor. I got 20 people with me, and his first response back is, Richie, where's the North Tower? Didn't even know where the North Tower was.
You know, one of the things that's happened over time is we tend to forget, and maybe thankfully we tend to forget, what an awful, obscene mess it was, not just on that day, but in the days and weeks that follow. We look at Ground Zero now, we take a look at it, and it looks like 1,000 construction sites in 1,000 cities, bigger than most, but that's how it looks. But in those days, it was this horrible, obscene, mangled mess. And you couldn't tell where this Building 7 was or anything else.
No, it was, like you said, it was immense. People who weren't down there, just no pictures and no film does it justice. We've been down there, the fire department and the construction workers, the iron workers have been tremendous. We've been down there 24/7 for 8 months, digging, looking, and it's over. That's what today is, it's over. But it'll never be forgotten.
No, it will not. Richard, stay with us for a while here. We're getting close to the ceremony. If we can just quickly take a look at Ground Zero, and why don't we do this? Why don't we take a break, and then we won't have to take another break through the course of this. The ceremony begins in a couple of minutes, and our coverage of the closing ceremony of the recovery phase of Ground Zero continues in a moment.
Treehouse.
I don't have a clue what I'm doing here.
Well, let's see what you got. Oh, wow, a treehouse.
He can build anything.
Never built anything before.
Relax, I think you're in the right spot.
He wants a trap door.
Balcony. Rope swing.
I'm going to suggest 16 penny.
You can do it.
You sure I can do this?
He's a genius.
Trust me.
All right.
Dad?
Yeah?
Thanks.
Critics are unanimous. Insomnia is a superb psychological thriller, raves Entertainment Weekly. CNN says Pacino and Williams are magnificent. Ethan and Roper, a great film, 2 thumbs up. USA Today says a perfect thriller, 4 stars. And Rolling Stone calls it the first film of the summer that should be remembered in the Oscar race. Insomnia. Rated R. Now playing at a theater near you.
They have lined the ramp. The workers, the bagpipe players. These are the fire departments. Richard, aren't they? The bagpipe players.
It's a combination, police and fire.
And they will have a role, a part in this. 260 days ago, we all came to work, went about our lives in the most normal way. A week after Labor Day, it was beautiful here in New York. And then it began to change. The first tower hit, the second, and then around 10 o'clock Eastern time, a little after that, the first tower collapsed. And then we knew the second tower would come down. It was unimaginable that it wouldn't, and at 10:29 on the 11th. Ringing of the bell 5 times in 4 sequences. 5555 is the signal that a fireman is down.
Halt!
The colors being presented. This is an interagency escort group. They are walking a stretcher up the ramp. This time it is empty. We have watched them do this countless times, though I must say not nearly often enough. There are so many that were never found. And every time this happened, no matter who it was, hats would come off, salutes were given, a chaplain would say a prayer, and that place we call Ground Zero, the place that they call the pile or the zone, would go stone silent. No matter what else was happening, it stopped. As it is now, and as it should be. 1,720 people not found. And that stretcher today symbolizes them. And what must their families think today? We hope this doesn't require many words from us. We would like you to just sit and watch it and feel it and think it and remember the things that matter to you. The ambulance awaits the stretcher, as it has so many times. PD is the Port Authority Police Department. They had a terrible day down there also. They are one of the agencies we recognize today for their extraordinary heroics. Standing next to them, the New York City Police and Fire Department. It's strange to remember that in the days before September 11th, there was a great tension between the police department and large parts of the community here in New York. And in a day, in a moment, all of that was set aside. We were reminded again what it means to protect and to serve, if we needed the reminder. Our New York City firemen, New York City Police, Port Authority Police, part of this escort team, all of the representative groups who worked on the recovery, the rescue in the early days, the recovery later. FEMA, Federal Emergency Management, represented. And of course the men who worked that construction, that recovery site with such dedication and diligence and respect. They all have a role. How different this all looks from the 11th. governor, the former mayor, and the current mayor of New York in the foreground there of your picture. The bagpipers will now move up the ramp, and behind them, a piece of steel, beam 1001B. It was the last beam taken down. It came down 2 nights ago. And it too is rich with sad symbolism of what once stood there. The fire station in Chelsea, not too terribly far from the Trade Center. 5 men from that company were lost. But no fire station in the city, whether they lost men or not, has not experienced the grief of this. There was a time when there were so many funerals of firefighters that they couldn't get enough bagpipers to each one. It is a tradition of the New York City Fire Department. so many funerals for a while, and they came with such frequency that people in New York were asked if they could to attend, whether they knew the person who died or not. And people would do that. They would go to churches and grieve. In the darkest times of last winter, as we came out of our shock, it is how many New Yorkers healed. That's the beam on that truck covered in the American flag. It stood at the South Tower. Underneath it, it's wrapped in a black shroud, and it is, for lack of a better word, decorated. There are the names of some of the people who worked there, some of the people who died there. It is an important piece of symbolism, the last piece of steel from the World Trade Center towers to be taken away. 2 million tons, almost 2 million tons of steel and glass came tumbling down that day and have been taken out. But never before it was searched, literally by men on their hands and knees, often trying to find whatever they could find. People never lost sight of the fact that while it was important to clean out the area, to begin again, that it was more important to make sure that everyone who could be brought home, in whatever way, shape, or form they could be brought home, was. And so they sifted through it all. Every last grain of sand and dirt and steel, they sifted through it.
Detail, present, Holmes!
These are the helicopters, a flyover of the New York City Fire Department, Police Department rather, coming over the site. You will notice, I'm sure you have, that this is not a day for speech making. And in the great wisdom of the people who helped make this moment possible, they understood that. The honor guard will begin to make its way up and out up the ramp, that long ramp. Hero is a word we use often, too often, I think. But the men and women you are looking at are American heroes. They have done awful, difficult work without complaint. In fact, the only really uncomfortable moment at Ground Zero in 260 days is when the city decided that it wanted to cut back on the number of firemen who could go down and help in the operation. It was a Friday, I remember it. It was a nasty and unpleasant day because people wanted to be there. Senator Clinton. Our applause they deserve.
Honor guard, left and right, face, away, huh!
Their victims' representatives, as you can tell, there also. This is their day too. It is all of our day, but it is theirs. The work at the site never stopped, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It rained, it snowed, it was cold, it was windy, it was frequently awful. And it was a privilege to be able to work the site. And I think every person I talked to, I suspect every person who was there, considered it a privilege to do that work. So many people from around the city helped out. I read the other day the Salvation Army estimates it served something like 3 million meals down there. You think about how many people needed to be fed. It was hard work, and how much food that is. 3 million meals. There was a restaurant down there that was a place where workers would come for a cup of coffee and a hamburger. And the guy pretty much went out of business, honestly, feeding them all. He wouldn't take a cent. Whatever people thought about New York and New Yorkers on the 10th of September, and that includes some of us who live here, I am somewhat embarrassed to admit. We saw our city and our people much differently. People sometimes think of New York as a series of almost balkanized neighborhoods. The Irish Americans live here, and the Italian Americans live there, and the Dominicans live up there. And one of the things the 11th taught us all is that's not really what we are at all. We are only a person or two, three at most, removed from one another. Everybody here knows someone who knows someone who knows someone who perished on the 11th. The governor, the mayor, and the former mayor leading the dignitaries out, and we mean this with no disrespect to any of the dignitaries. This is not their moment, nor did they claim it. God bless them. They knew perhaps better than anyone whose moment this was. Again, these are the people who work the site. The Port Authority police officers, the New York City Police and Fire Department. They didn't do the construction work or the deconstruction work, the clearing out. They did the search, the recovery. And we think about them a lot today because in the days ahead, their lives are going to change in ways most of us cannot fathom. I was thinking last night about the Port Authority officer who has been down there for 260 days, who will tomorrow or the next day or next Tuesday, someday soon, go back to chasing toll evaders and the more mundane things of life. They're important things if society is going to run well, but they are not the things that are larger than all of us. And what these men have been doing for all these days is so much larger than any of us can imagine, so much more important. And now they go back to their lives. And in many ways, the rest of us, all over the country, here in New York and in Des Moines and Minneapolis and in Los Angeles, all of us have had almost 9 months to begin to come to grips with what happened on the 11th, what happened to our country, our city, what happened to our sense of well-being. Many of these men and women have not had that luxury. They have been too busy and too consumed. And so we think about them today and we worry about them today. Patron, I hope I pronounced that right. Did I? Is with us. Pat is with Project Liberty. You think about these workers and what their lives are going to be. What are we worrying about here?
Specifically with these workers, what we worry about is exactly what you said. There's a change in their life now. A lot of people have described themselves as having been very, very invested in the rescue initially, in the recovery, and now what? Where do I go now? What do I think now? Who's going to listen to me? Who's there for me?
And, you know, this probably doesn't need to be said, but I'll say it anyway. These are not people who are whining about anything. They are trying to cope with an incredibly complicated set of emotional facts. Those of us who spent time in Oklahoma City learned a fair amount about the dangers of the period ahead and the kinds of things we worry about, divorce and drug abuse and the like. How do you deal with it?
What we do in Project Liberty is offer crisis counseling and outreach. Where we think people might be in need, we will go there. We'll go there and we'll seek out people and let them know that we're available. The support that people receive in individual counseling, crisis counseling, and group crisis counseling has really been reportedly very, very helpful.
I know the fire department has been offering counseling to, and I also know that firefighters are a pretty tough bunch of guys, and in truth are not the first guy to go see the shrink.
Yeah, that's a big problem. I mean, we have a perception, and there's a self-perception that we are tough guys. We can slough off anything. We can't slough this off. There's a tremendous need. A lot of guys have been going for counseling. A lot of the families, a lot of the widows and children of the missing firemen, they need help. But I think one of the biggest potential is the guys who are down there working. And like you were saying, now there's a lot of people who are signed down there, but in the fire department there's a lot of volunteers, a lot of fathers, former firefighters, current firefighters who are volunteering 2-3 days a week of their own time going down there. And what are they going to do Monday morning?
Yeah, Pat, I think the most insensitive thing anyone can say to anybody right now is you got to move on. In a sense, it's not that you have to move on, it's that you have to find the right place in your heart and in your mind for this awful experience.
You have to take care of yourself. You have to learn how to cope with the world the way it is now. We see a lot of, out of the fire department, we see a lot of parents of firefighters that were lost in a group that we run at Staten Island University Hospital. And the resiliency, like you mentioned before, Aaron, is amazing. That people have been able to bounce back, look for ways to cope, reach out. But I do wish that more people would reach out for the help.
We were, this won't surprise you because you're in this business, We were sitting one day in a firehouse in Brooklyn talking to the men in that company, and I asked them if, and they were making almost daily visits to the families, to the wives and children of people who had been lost. And I said, do you think that's helpful to them? And the guy looked at me and said, no, actually, I think it works the other way. They help us. We draw from their strengths, from the strength of widows, from the strength of friends, the ability to go on. We are humans, a remarkably resilient species, and we have, they have, not we, they have experienced an extraordinary trauma, an extraordinary loss, and you just worry. You worry.
We also, if I can add this, a major group of people that have required help and support have been the people that evacuated from the buildings that day. Whether they were injured or not, the trauma that they've experienced and the nightmares that they experienced subsequently has been horrible for them.
This comes up with people like the people who got out. This will, I suspect, will be a really a dangerous problem for firemen who got out and survived. One of the ways that humans torture themselves is they feel guilty for having lived when others did not. Rescue workers in Oklahoma City, why didn't I save more? This, I think, for the rescue units in the fire department, the EMS people, firemen themselves, because in many respects, there are very few people like you, Richard, who were rescued, who did get out. There must be in the back of their minds a sense of, and we hope this is not true, small guilt.
Without a doubt. I was there. I felt I did everything I could do that day. I was in the building when it collapsed, and I went through all the emotions. I had the guilt, for months. Maybe I didn't do enough. Maybe I could have did something more. And when I look over my day, I wouldn't do a single thing differently. We helped a lot of people that day. But the guilt is there, that range of emotions, that emotional roller coaster. Guilt, rage, it's there.
It's a terrible thing. Our rational minds always lose the battle to our emotional selves. We know, you did everything you could. And yet, your emotional being somehow expects you, all of them, to have done more. It's a cruel trick.
Well, it's terrible. And with the firemen, we change shifts, and so if a company died or someone died and someone was supposed to work for him or he was working for you that day, or an officer who said, well, if I was closer to my men...
Just let me, I'm sorry to interrupt you. If we can go back to that picture, I don't know if people noticed it. People were holding photos. Who does not remember in those terrible early days after the attack, that first week after the attack, the members of the families of the missing would come down to the Armory, as I recall, here in New York, with photos, with posters. The entire parts of Lower Manhattan were plastered with photos. Have you seen? It was, there it is. Well, it looks like some of those pictures are President Bush, so maybe I read something into something that wasn't there. In any case, it is how I remembered the moment. And in that period of time, which I think to many of us is quite blurry, one terribly long day, those families and their hope, and each day how that hope diminished, was as painful as anything we've experienced in our lives. And I can't see those pictures and those posters and not think of it. And Richard, I apologize for interrupting.
No problem. It's, matter of fact, just what you're saying happened with me a lot. I was in the building. I saw a lot of people. One of the last person survived and see people. I've been talking to a lot of the brothers, wives, and they want to know, did you see someone that day? Did you see my husband? Did you see my brother? What was he doing? What did he say? They're grasping. And you know, a lot of them I did see, a lot of them I didn't. But you know, I tried to talk to as many people as I could to give them that last moment.
I remember, I don't come up here often. I remember being up here on the Saturday after the attack with a mother and a fiancé, young boy, young man who did not get out. And they were hopeful as you could be 5 days later, which wasn't very, to be perfectly honest. And I remember that she started to tremble. And I don't know why I've thought of this right now. There's nothing quite in your professional experience that teaches you what to do in a moment like that on television. And so you do what you do as a person. And you throw an arm around her. And I think around the city in those days, a lot of arms were thrown around, a lot of strangers. It was in many ways the best of all of us in the city.
There's other stories, Aaron, like Greg Manning had said about his wife. There are some miraculous stories that have come out, regardless of whether it was escapes or rescue. Really, it's good to hear those stories also.
Yeah. We draw strength from tragedy, all of us. Thank you both for joining us. And I think in many ways, the people of New York and the people of the country have drawn strength from this terrible attack on our city and on our country and on our way of life. We close one chapter of that today, one painful chapter. There are more difficult, painful chapters ahead. But this one is closed, the recovery at ground zero. And it was done in the way you hoped it would be done, with a kind of quiet dignity that always spoke there all these days, 260 days since those buildings came tumbling down. Take a moment to think about it, and thanks for joining us this morning for the closing of Ground Zero.
Race-inspired cockpit, chronograph-style instrumentation, introducing the Lexus IS 300 5-speed. Totally unexpected, especially starting at under $30,000. For an incredible value, just show up at your Lexus dealer.
I'm looking at your portfolio right now. You gotta buy.
Yes, time for picking, time for buying.
Do a super strong buy. I think you should buy.
I think you should buy it.
It's a buy.
Buy it. Just buy.
It's a no-brainer. I'd sell.
Did I say sell?
No, I meant buy, yes!
There's never been a better time for Schwab Equity Ratings, a way to help you decide what to sell as well as buy. A through F ratings on 3,000 stocks, not influenced by investment banking. To learn more, call 1-800-9-SCHWAB.
Ned, your appointment is here.
Oh, just a minute. Okay, will I sell this new home loan today? But why? Is it Ditech.com? Oh no, not again!
Need cash? Apply for a second mortgage with a no closing cost option. Just call 1-800-246-5530.
I lost another loan to Ditech.com.
Ditech.com, your mortgage solution delivered.
Challenging, insightful, surprising.
It's the human side of human events.
Connie Chung premiering in June, only on CNN.
It's the Home Remodeling and Decorating Show, now in 4 big buildings. May 31st through June 2nd, Orange County Fairgrounds. The only show endorsed by the League of California Homeowners. Special features include do-it-yourself workshops, plus everything for your dream yard. Spas, decks, gazebos, barbecues, and more. Win $5,000 worth of kitchen refacing from Kitchen King. It's your dream kitchen. Sign up for the show. Get a free how-to videotape at the show and a mail-in coupon good for the famous TV Smart Chopper. The Home Show, Friday through Sunday, May 31st through June 2nd, Orange County Fairgrounds. Details in the Times, Orange County.
8,000 cars and trucks. 8 days to sell them, and time is running out. Your Ford dealer has 0.9 APRs and the customer cash you've been waiting for. Get a low 0.9% APR for 5 years on Mustang, Explorer, Windstar, and 2002 Expedition. That's 0.9 for 5 years. Get to your Ford dealer, but get here by Friday, because when May's over, it's over. This is CNN.
On this bittersweet morning, it is 11:13 a.m. in the East Coast, 8:13 on the West Coast. Good morning. I'm Frederica Whitfield in for Darren Kagan and Leon Harris. 8.5 months, 2,823 victims, 3 million hours of backbreaking, exhausting work. And today, a solemn ceremony marking the official end of the recovery effort at Ground Zero. You're looking at live pictures from the site where the ceremony just ended moments ago. It began exactly at 10:29 a.m. Eastern Time, the moment the second World Trade Center tower collapsed on September 11th. We'll have extensive coverage from Ground Zero this hour, but first, here's a look at some of the other headlines in our news alert. A tense standoff between India and Pakistan escalates to an even more ominous level. The U.S. says India has begun the process of loading some medium-range missiles with conventional warheads. Meanwhile, Muslim extremists attacked a police post in the disputed Kashmir region today, killing at least 3 police officers. FBI Director Robert Mueller says more terrorist attacks on U.S. soil are coming, and the FBI won't be able to stop all of them. Mueller made the comments in a television interview today. Yesterday, he unveiled plans for a massive reorganization of the FBI to focus on counterterrorism. Mexican police have recovered 70 more drums of cyanide believed to be from a stolen truck. A total of 96 drums were on the truck when it was hijacked earlier in the month. The truck and 20 of the barrels were found about a week later. 6 drums may be still unaccounted for. Up first on CNN, reflection and remembrance. The terrorist attacks on September 11th shattered thousands of lives and reduced the gleaming World Trade Center towers to rubble. Since then, workers have toiled around the clock to recover the victims and remove the tons of concrete and twisted steel. Today, that work officially ended. CNN's Michael Oku is live at Ground Zero with the details from there. Hi there, Michael.
Frederica, good morning to you. The only words that I can describe about this event were simple, solemn, and for the most part, silent. This was not a day for long, drawn-out speeches. In fact, it wasn't a day for speeches of any kind. The event started precisely at 10:29 a.m., which is exactly when Tower 2 at the World Trade Center came crashing down. Now, the event started with the traditional ringing of the New York City Fire Department bell. It rang exactly 20 times, 4 sets of 5 rings to signify the signal of when a firefighter has fallen. And then a very, very solemn moment. About 220 representatives from city, state, and federal agencies and private organizations who were involved in the cleanup and recovery effort here at Ground Zero assembled along the ramp that leads in and out of Ground Zero. They waited as escorts essentially brought a procession, started a procession carrying a stretcher with a folded American flag on top of it. This, we were told, signified the 1,720 people, all of whom died on 9/11 and have still not been found or identified. That stretcher was placed in an ambulance and followed by a pipe and drum unit, including players from the New York City Fire Department as well as the New York City Police Department. You're seeing pictures of the stretcher going into the ambulance even now. Then a recovery truck draped in a black cloth proceeded behind the ramp carrying the very last load of steel. This was a large steel beam that had been at the center, at the southernmost tip of the World Trade Center site, essentially used for many, many weeks as a beacon to the buried. Recovery workers used it essentially to find where the largest number, following many, many months, of the dead had been laying, and in fact it proved to be quite a beacon for them. And then, of course, Taps was played, America the Beautiful was played, and then helicopters flew over the site in formation. The procession, Federica, lasted for about 20 minutes or so. It took another 5 minutes for those recovery workers, police officers, and firefighters to make their way up the ramp. I'm trying not to overstate this, but I thought that I had seen it all on September 11th and in the weeks following September 11th. But this was a day of high emotion. Even among the very hardened press corps, there were some tears shed. And throughout the course of the whole expanse of Lower Manhattan, certainly this 16-acre site here, there were moments where you could not hear anything. One of my colleagues, Maria Hinojosa, said that rarely have you ever seen anything move so slowly in New York, and in fact, that was the case. I want to talk again about numbers. After September 11th, we talked so much about numbers. It was one of the very few ways we could convey to the general public the magnitude of what had happened here. 2,823 people died, and again, over 1,700 people have yet to be identified. This is the end of a chapter, but certainly not the end of a story. Federica?
And Michael, there were thousands there, but how does that compare to what the level of expectations were of those attending this ceremony this morning? No exact numbers are in just yet, but how does it compare?
Well, they were very tightly secure here. There were police officers who were providing security, and there were literally hundreds and hundreds of police officers who were part of the festivities, lined up in formation clearly, as far as my eyes could see. They had the amount of people here that they expected to have. You couldn't really fit too many more people down here at Ground Zero. Again, when I say that it was a spectacle and it was a sight to see, and I'm trying not to overstate it, the fact is to see this many thousands of people assembled here at the very southernmost tip of Manhattan, and to not hear anything throughout most of this ceremony was really extraordinary. Federica?
All right, thank you very much. Michael Oku from Ground Zero. And among the thousands of people witnessing the procession, they're comforting one another, not only just the workers out there, people of all walks of life, including Father Brian Jordan, who is a priest at St. Francis of Assisi Church. It is just a stone's throw away from the disaster site. He was one of the many who was on the scene first up, comforting several families then as he did today. And he joins us now, Father Jordan, Father Brian, as we like to call him. He joins us now from Ground Zero. You comforted and escorted at least 4 families to the ceremonies today. How did you find that comforting those families today may have been a little different from the kind of comforting you have been offering them for now 8 months?
it's a mutual source of comfort. I also was affected by the loss of loved ones through friends, 11 friends. So bringing 4 families down here today was a part of our ongoing pilgrimage here to the shrine. And this gives closure to the recovery operation, but the mourning period still continues on.
And the comforting that you have been offering the families there and the workers has really evolved. There were so many people who their immediate feelings were pain, were anger, and then you found an awful lot of the workers, the volunteers there who felt like this was more than just a labor of love to be at that site every day. How did you offer them comfort?
Well, it's a job of a priest to give comfort and help people out in desperate situations, especially like this. I just listened to them mostly. I comfort them. I cried with them. I laughed with them whenever it was possible. I talk with them on the phone on a constant basis. They're with me all the time. I'm with them all the time. It's just the ongoing presence of being there with someone. No woman, no man is an island. We all need each other. And especially in times like this, it's my job as a Catholic priest to help out the people of God in these particular matters.
And leading up to today, what did volunteers and workers there express to you as to what they thought would be the appropriate, most fitting way in which to memorialize the end of this the Ground Zero work there?
That's an excellent question. We discussed with my fellow workers and volunteers in the different place, whether it be down the hole or in the tent around there, what would be the ideal ceremony. And we all agreed unanimously there should be no speeches, there should be a short ceremony, the economy of expression, and that we understand that actions speak louder than words, and the actions that we've seen here today certainly spoke for themselves so eloquently, so lovingly, so touchingly, and all of us were deeply moved by the ceremony, and we're grateful for those who prepared it, that they listened to our input, and they listened to the economy of expression, which truly deserves respect and reverence on this sacred and hallowed ground.
And now that that ceremony is over, do you feel now, looking back at this ceremony, that this really was the most fitting, the most appropriate way in which to memorialize so many people who have died and so many who have given countless hours to help?
This is just a transition step. This will be the first of many times to give a memorial. It's a shrine. We're not only honoring the dead, we're also giving honor and respect to those who worked here. So we bless the dead and we give consolation to the living, especially for the family members here. This is just the first of many steps for their own transition process to deal with the grief and the bereavement and sense of loss that they have. Again, I reiterate, this is the closure of the recovery operation, but the mourning period still continues on. And my job as a priest and many other people of religious faiths and backgrounds will offer help and consolation on an ongoing basis.
And the grieving does still continue for so many family members, and people who have been victimized in so many different levels have said that it has been difficult to laugh or even smile. There have been countless low points. What kind of high points have you been able to extract from this entire experience?
I guess the key thing for many family members is the ability and the willingness to come here. There was a lot of hesitation and resistance to do so, and if to talk with them and convince them to come here just to have a sense of peace and closure and say goodbye, at least spiritually, emotionally, to their loved one. Secondly, with the ongoing grief process, this is a horrible, despicable attack. It has no parallel within U.S. history. So this type of horrible attack is going to take a longer with the grief and bereavement process. That's why I encourage people to go to support groups, to go to their clergy members, go to grief counselors, whatever, to talk to someone. Don't be isolated. We're all in this together. We in America all have been victimized by this terrible attack, and we all want to help each other out as sisters and brothers of the same God.
All right, Father Brian, well said. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much as well.
Now, the loss to the New York City Fire Department on September 11th was staggering. 343 firefighters died in their efforts to save others. 5 of the firefighters were from Engine 3, Ladder 12 in Chelsea, and our Jason Carroll is at the firehouse there this morning. Hi there, Jason.
And good morning to you, Frederica. I have to tell you, standing here in this intimate setting when that ceremony was taking place, it was an incredibly moving moment, not just for me, but obviously for everyone who came here today to Engine Company number 3. Why don't you take a look? You can see the room is still filled with some of the firefighters. Some of the victims' family members are here as well. Everyone coming together for support during this very sensitive time. At one point during the ceremony, the chaplain stood up in front of the room and he read part of a prayer. He said, "We cannot bring people back, but we can honor their memory in the way we honor one another." Those words certainly hitting home to this man right here, Captain Robert Norcross here at Engine Company number 3. Captain, if you could just start out by talking to me about what some of your thoughts are now that the ceremony is over.
Well, it's never really over. The ceremony is just part of the grieving process, we think. Even though Ground Zero will be closed, for us their memories are still as fresh as it was September 11th.
I noticed here as I was standing in the room, people cried when that empty stretcher was brought out of Ground Zero. They gave a salute as the steel girder was brought out as well, but always this sort of determined look on everyone's face here in the room.
Well, the mission isn't complete yet. We have not identified all the bodies, and we would like to have all our members recovered at some point.
In fact, of the 5 victims from this particular engine company, how many? Just 3 of the 5?
3 were recovered and 2 are still missing, yes.
So what's next then? I mean, does this, in a sense, bring any closure for you at all? I know that some people have said closure is a word that cannot be used at this moment in time.
No, I don't think we kept thinking there was going to be closure. After all of our memorials were over, we thought we had closure, the holidays, the 6-month anniversary today, but we still have another couple of months to go to the 1-year anniversary, and then we'll be in the holiday. I don't know when there will be closure.
We've just been looking at some of the pictures of the men who did not survive from September 11th. Earlier this morning, I was talking to one of the firefighters. I asked him what would he be thinking about during the moment of silence. He said, "I'll be thinking about the 5 men." What were some of your thoughts during that moment of silence?
Well, I specifically thought of the 5 men, but we had 343 members lost, but the thousands of people. You know, the fire department has got a lot of acclaim during this, but there was a lot of people that were missing at this time.
Captain Robert Norcross, thank you so very much for joining us this very sensitive time. One final thought, if I could, Frederica. At some point during the ceremony, midway through, the fire station got a call. Some of the men had to then get up and go out. In a way, symbolically, it's just a reminder of what these men are all about. They never, at one moment, stop being firefighters. Frederica?
Never hesitation. Thank you very much, Jason Carroll. Workers at Ground Zero have often said that they have witnessed the 2 extremes of humanity, the cruelty that brought down the buildings and the compassion that drew armies of volunteers like those firefighters to the wreckage. 2 of those workers are joining me now, Amy Lynette Smith and Bob Klein, both volunteers with the Interfaith World Trade Center Relief. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Amy, let me begin with you. How were the ceremonies for you?
They were absolutely solemn, honorable, and it's exactly the way that we really should remember all of the people that died and all of the people that were so dedicated to this city and to this country, that gave their time and energy and love and compassion. And the silence was wonderful. Every day, being in Battery Park City, every day you hear 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The lights, the backup from all the machinery, so it was wonderful to hear actually silence there. It was amazing.
Bob, for you, that silence, did you feel that it's particularly resounding because your efforts as a volunteer and other volunteers, this has really been a labor fueled by anger, by frustration, by pain, and by patriotism. And now that that labor is over, it would seem for an awful lot of volunteers and workers that it's going to be difficult now to kind of channel those energies.